Hello and welcome back to our latest Regcast, the first of 3 this week. Busy week for us. Today we're looking at going beyond consolidation. With the bad news is that if you have been consolidating your data center over the last year and you're exhausted and ready to collapse in a heap at the end of the year, well, you've hardly started, because, come on, we've got to get to a private cloud. We're going to work out what the difference is between your virtualized data center and your private cloud today. Now, let's have a look at who's helping us to do this. You know, I can't really do it on my own. So joining us from Microsoft, first time in the studio for Lucas Searle. Lucas, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, Lucas, because it's near Christmas, or imagine it's near Christmas if you're watching the on demand, because it's near Christmas, we're asking people what they want for Christmas. What do you want?
With 2 young children, I want them to sleep in beyond 6 o'clock would be my ideal side, so I actually get a decent night's sleep.
Yeah, dream on.
Preference. I know, it is a hope and a dream.
Yeah, it's, but I mean, it's the magic of Christmas. It's all for them. Financially, it is as well, isn't it? And also from our old mates, Freeform Dynamics, welcome back, Andy Buss.
Good morning, Tim.
Now, Andy, I'm not going to ask you what you want for Christmas, because it occurred to me this morning, I was looking at your name, you are the only analyst I know who is named after a mode of transport. Yeah, exactly. Now, so yeah, I mean, I was just, do other analysts, do they, mention this to you? They go, ding, ding, Andy, all changed.
But then everything. I get 3 opinions all at once.
Okey-doke, yeah. Yes. Lucas, do you know anyone at Microsoft named after a mode of transport?
No, I don't actually.
Right, just think about that while we're going on. And if you are named after a mode of transport, please do let us know. I mean, yeah, I've got a friend called Laurie. That's her first name. Does that count? I went to school with a guy called Jason Carr. Yeah, exactly. See? It's surprisingly frequent. Anyway, that's one of the things you might want to send in a little note to us about. And that's the most important tab on the interface you can set. Right. Ask us questions. If there's things about this that we're not explaining properly, or we are explaining, there's a thought in your head about that, then please do send us in the question, and I'll put it to these guys, make sure they give you a proper answer. Note also you can download these slides as a PDF, and it is useful because we've got a lot of charts today, and I've been looking at them, and I have to say some of them I found quite complicated. Now, the guys do a good explanation, but you might want those at hand later on to remind you. So, my name's Timothy Rollerskates, and let's get on with our Regcast today. Now, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be explaining, the most important bit is explaining the difference between your virtualized data center and what the industry is calling a private cloud, and why that might be a useful transition for you to make. Andy, what we have to say right at the beginning here is this private cloud thing, is it really just a new name for the virtualized data center that vendors have thought up to make people buy things?
Yes, to a large degree, we could say that. Dynamic data center is a brilliant concept going forwards. But what it means is, by the time we get to the virtualized data center and moving into the dynamic cloud, you are moving towards an application ecosystem really that's capable of moving around your data center. So where are we today? Well, we're really right at the beginning of virtualization. Think of it as coming down from the trees. We're not really that experienced yet. We're just starting to walk on 2 feet. And by the time we get up and running, it's going to take a bit of time, a bit of practice, but when we get there, we'll be faster, better, more agile, able to feed ourselves, keep ourselves warm, and eventually move to the beauty of that desk in front of us and sit down and play on a PC.
But Lucas, nothing is really broken if people stop here. If you've just gone through a sort of a tactical virtualization program and you've done a lot of work on that, things are working better for you.
Absolutely, definitely been improvements. Definitely been improvements, and the business has seen savings. I think the challenge where most people are today is actually there's still a large amount of complexity. There's still a lot of manual processes that are sitting that they have to deal with, and if the business makes more demands on them, then actually they're not being able to sort of cater for it, and it leaves mainly IT people with basically a view from the business that they're not really serving the business as they should be.
I just had to laugh. I'm really sorry. I was listening to you, but David's just sent in the message that there's a guy working at IBM called Rick Shaw.
Rick Shaw. The best one.
No, it's serious. No, but we have. This is a serious amount of work, though. We're talking about to cross this chasm, Andy.
It is, and I think one thing we've got to realise is we can take it one step at a time. The business tends to drive what's happening and therefore the investment that's required. It's not something IT really should be looking at on its own, but we can start to move in small steps to make IT a bit more efficient. But really where the value lies is when IT gets hooked up with what the business wants to do.
Mm-hmm. And is this a one major project, or is it a bit by bit? Can you just take this in small chunks?
It is a combination of the two. Most of it will be small chunks, but going forwards we need to think about how we can get all the different elements of the network working together. So right now where we are, it's early days, and it's unlikely everything buys into the situation. So it makes sense to consolidate an application here, a system there, and bring it all together so that in certain areas you're a lot more effective. But going forwards, it's not going to really be sufficient because you'll be stuck with a bottleneck. So we need to look at everything from the network, the storage, the servers, and the applications, and how you secure them to make sure that they all work together.
I mean, a lot of people so far, and a lot of the coverage that we've done about virtualization in the last year or so has been about which things you pick to virtualize first, and people have picked the easy things, the things where they get most immediate benefit from. But what we're saying here now is that we have to have a bigger view on it. Is that right?
Absolutely. So I think if you look at most people, they've started early file and print, some applications, but there are a lot of businesses who are actually doing virtualization and putting it on for their mission critical applications. So I think although there is a lot of work to do, there's also a lot of people who have actually started to solve these problems, and people can look to their peers to actually find answers, as well as the Regcast that you guys are delivering.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly, the good information mostly comes in Regcast, but there are other sources of information as well. And so the pain in that is this a lot of grunt work, Andy, or is this a management thing?
It is very much a management thing. Right today we are working very hard. We're not always working smart. We're doing a lot of things manually where really we should be thinking about how we scale. And that is part of the big challenge that moving to the dynamic data center will bring. Mm-hmm. So it's about moving at the speed that's right for the business. Mm-hmm. And for some companies, IT can drive this behavior a bit, but really it's about the business putting demands on IT. And the need to move from just a pure consolidation architecture to a dynamic one will really be driven by the business saying to IT, we need you to do things. And IT going, help, we can't do this on our own. We're struggling to move quickly enough. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough systems. How do we move at the speed that the business wants us to move?
So when you look at your 4 blocks you've isolated here, the basics, the efficients, the strategics, and the optimised, how many of the Reg audience are basics?
Well, we're probably a third are in the basic level. Probably about a third are hitting the efficient level, and a bit of a split between the rest, between really the strategic and optimised.
So most people are on the left-hand side, and we're talking about moving them to the right-hand side.
We are.
Right. Is this what you're seeing, Lucas, when out in the world that most people are doing the basic stuff?
So I think from the market perspective, you see a lot of people around basic, probably about sort of 20%, and they might have actually virtualised maybe their servers up to around 10% of their estate. But there are certainly 10-20% of people around strategic and optimised who are actually virtualising 60%, even up to 80% of their server base. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, they're looking at some of the processes that underpin that. So I think this is a fair reflection, but I think also it's worth pointing out that there are a good amount of people who are actually on the far right, are heading that way. They're starting to address it.
But I mean, it's a long. I mean, looking at some of the things that you have to put in place here, this looks like a lot of work and a long project.
I think as people move, and as Andy said, is you start to actually some of the pieces that are automated, you start to have already as a bedrock. You're not worrying about them anymore. So actually, as you move towards the right, you actually start to find new processes and more actually the workloads that were there anyway that people didn't get a chance to focus on. Now they can actually look at how they do business focus backup, how they look at service levels, and actually that becomes a project in itself that actually helps drive the business forward. So there are clearer paths as people actually move some of the problems out of the way and some of the complexity and start to look at actually some of the, in some ways, the more business focused pieces that are of interest to the IT team.
So let's have a look from that point of view at some of these sort of business-focused things. This is a slide that you came up with, Lucas, on this, to talk about the how the private cloud and what that means compared to just a very highly virtualized.
So I think we're flicking left and right on those slides very quickly. Give people a bit of a blur.
Just don't touch the mouse, right? Whatever you
don't touch the mouse.
Don't touch the mouse.
So I think this is really trying to focus on where a lot of people are highly virtualized, but there is a difference between private cloud. People actually need to look at really three things that will actually start to drive, in some ways, their behavior to be more strategic and more advanced, and the ideal of a dynamic data center. And the first thing that people have to look at is all of those processes that were identified in the slides before, is start to look at which ones you can automate, because that's the piece that removes, I suppose, the workload that people have on them, and actually starts to allow them to look at actually how do they deliver back to the business. So I think from the business perspective, what they actually want is to be able to get very consumable services, and people call it self-service. It could be a service catalogue, all of those elements about actually delivering something to the business. These are really the three areas that we'd see as actually buckets that people can start to look at in their journey towards private cloud. And I think the other side is actually what are they going to get out of it when they start to get there. So primarily people move towards private cloud because of speed and agility. It's been agile to the business. With that comes a lot more ability to actually lower the costs across data centers, so go beyond those initial consolidation benefits. But primarily, it's about putting a service in the hands of the business. That's where we see I suppose the next generation of what IT are looking at doing.
Now, while we're talking about this, there's a question that's coming from Ben, which is it's an important question. And when we're looking at some of these things, self-service and making these things highly automated and having to put the technologies in, and we're talking about how it's difficult and can sometimes take a long time. Are we saying necessarily that people should do all of this themselves? Why not have the private cloud hosted by a third party and get them to do all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely, and that's what every IT vendor would love us to buy into straight from the bat. But there's a reality.
They're selling us a pup, are they?
There is some value to it, but today the actual reality behind behavior is that cloud is not really the most popular option, and that's for a number of reasons. People's data centers are actually pretty well run today. They've architected them over 10, 12 years and renewed them regularly. They know how they run. They're reasonably efficient, actually, and what's happening is they're getting more efficient with the basic concepts of things like consolidation, so moving workloads down to fewer machines, so you're saving on your capex. And more what we're seeing now is the move to, now that you've got away from the tin and you can run the workloads virtualized, it's how do we actually make it now effective for the business, rather than just running things in the old way. If the business is requiring you to be more agile, more cost effective, how do we change from the old way of doing things, which was really manually managing physical things, physical workloads, physical machines? How do we change from that concept and now take advantage of this virtualization to move things dynamic?
So in some ways saying, let's just outsource the whole process of this, that's sort of copping out a little bit. This is entirely what our viewers should be doing.
We should be moving to really dynamic IT infrastructure internally before thinking about moving externally. If we can't manage what's in-house today, just purely putting it on someone else will mean, in most cases, an unsatisfactory solution because you don't really know what services you want to deliver. So unless you can actually cost-effectively do it internally, measure that, and then manage it externally with a supplier, you're going to be in dire straits. Now, some companies can manage that, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. But for most who are just doing consolidation today, moving straight to cloud for what they run on their internal servers is probably not valid.
Yeah, I think it's not a black or white model for people. I think if you look at small businesses, then actually a lot of people can decide there's an application I don't want to look after, and it's a good time to actually put it into a cloud service, whether it be a CRM type application or an email application. Then that can be very valid for some people. Other sides, it could be because there's an application which is just old and does not serve the business.
But we're really talking about people with a little bit more resource and experience and that sort of thing today, and really this is something that has to be taken on as part of the progression.
It is. I think everyone that we see are having questions of which bits do I keep on my premise? I've invested in the data center. Which ones do I actually then put as a service externally? And actually, more importantly, a lot of the pieces that we're talking through today around some of the I think the process and the automation are still relevant whether you keep it in your data center or you put it in a third party. It is actually sort of trying to bring that service mentality together for them.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So I'm sorry you don't get out of it that easily. So, Andy, now let's have a look at this. Moving beyond the consolidation here, this is the research from the register audience, is it?
That is right, yes.
Yeah, and so they've done a lot of consolidation, not quite so much of the other stuff.
No, but it is on the radar, and it's what people are interested in doing going forwards. And the big question is, what's the right time? What's the right way to do it? And how do we do it cost effectively? And also, how do we do it in a way that doesn't destroy what we've already built? Because a lot of companies have good people that have good management experience, that have built up the systems, and if you suddenly change either to an outsourced model or a completely different way of doing things, it can actually wreck things if you don't plan the transition properly.
Now, we've got a question from David here, so he's asking, where should we be starting on this, which is a question we get all the time on these sort of things. Luke, so I think you've probably got some advice moving on this about where we should actually get involved with this. Where can people start off?
So I think to answer the question earlier, so I think that there are a number of assessment services that people can actually sort of look at first to understand what is if they're at the stage of virtualization and they're looking at perhaps which are the processes to automate, is to first sort of see what are some of the processes that actually suck up a lot of time from the IT team. And those types of assessments actually will deliver some candidates and some quick wins for the business to actually start to move forward. I think some of the broader benefits that those assessments start to look at for people is they start to see, well, actually, how are we trying to deliver something new for the business? What's a new business requirement that's coming in? How can we take that process of taking a new business requirement in, understand how to quickly turn it into something the business can use? And I think that's one of the key differences to virtualization is actually you're looking at more of the elasticity to be able to turn a business service on, up or down, as well as actually spread it across some of the resource pools. But I think very much that is the aspiration of where people are moving forward. And I think on the next slide we see more of the challenges of where people face stuff today.
So what we're saying that what you can do with this, with highly virtualized computing, that's not enough?
No, it's not enough. It's not enough. Because in generally, when you're looking at virtualized infrastructures, we saw on the slides earlier, people tend to still develop their architecture around a server-specific scenario or an application-specific scenario. And when then you scale that application up, you're actually then using more resources than is necessary. Whereas I think the slide earlier that Andy was showing actually almost a resource pool end-to-end that is then people or applications and services are dipping into according to the demand they have, provides a much more cost-efficient service that the IT team can manage, but also, more importantly, the business can actually benefit from.
Quick question about this one, Andy. This question that came in, as people are saying, it's all very well for us to talk about this because, well, I'm reading between the lines here because we're sitting in the studio and we don't have to do it. But the problem that you've got is that forever chasing these tactical gains gets in the way of the big strategic thinking. You don't have time to do both or resources to do both.
Absolutely, and dynamic data center, dynamic infrastructure will always be competing for resources.
Yeah.
The trick is to realize that investing in dynamic infrastructure can actually alleviate a lot of the problems. And we've got to think both tactically and strategically at the same time. So everything we do must have an impact now, but also what we must invest in should be applicable to what we want to do in 18 months' time. So if the company wants to be in a situation where it's quick to respond, that it's dynamic and agile, IT really needs to put in place the underlying infrastructure, not just virtualizing individual silos. And what we can see today is it's actually got to solve a couple of fairly fundamental problems along the way.
So this comes from your research again with the Reg audience, does it?
It does, yes. Yeah. And really the biggest challenges that IT tends to face is very much not really around technology, but around managing the technology and how you architect and run the IT ecosystem that you have. And it's really operation stuff, for example, continually overstretched. And if your guys are overstretched, you're just struggling to actually meet service requirements today, let alone what you're trying to do in terms of morphing the service capability of the network. And so we need to get beyond these people running around trying to firefight and being able to invest in new ways of doing things. And these are problems that have plagued IT for 10, 15 years, and they're not going away overnight. But what it does mean is we can get in new architectures, we can implement new architectures, new technologies that can start to alleviate this, start to free up some of the mundane tasks, and allow the guys to actually work on implementing some of the more dynamic side of the IT ecosystem.
And from in terms of how the IT department presents itself, that's something that's a question that when you make Tony Locks in here, that's what it's the conversation we always have. As I think he had a hard time when he was an IT manager. In how it presents itself at being competent, being able to do that. In automating some of these tasks, is there the problem that the IT department looks like it's sort of pushing things off, that it doesn't want to do them?
I don't think so. I think automation is very much a matter of both politics, experience and trust. And in one case, automation does not mean that people in the IT department go away, but it frees them up to do more valuable things. And without automation, we can't really get the scale that you need to manage things that are dynamic. Yeah. If every time someone has to sign a chit form and get someone allocated to do it, you're never really going to move your workloads around. It needs to be an automated system.
More valuable and less boring as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I agree. It is those. There are so many low-value tasks that are actually being done, and actually there's a stack of other IT processes that would be preferable that the business and the IT team do, but actually never quite get around to them. As you see here, things like patch management, patching of servers, something that actually you shouldn't have human interference with. Some of those templates and the processes to actually put that through, it can be automated a lot easier. Even down to things like reporting, general reporting of things back to the business. I mean, from an outsourcer's perspective as well, reporting onto different customers sucks up an inordinate amount of time and can be automated very easily.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tommy, this is your what we're calling the Stairway to Heaven slide.
Absolutely.
In this, and heaven is represented by red blobs in this. Explain what this is.
Well, this is the types of things that once people have implemented a dynamic infrastructure, the things in red are the ones that really they've had to change their thinking on compared to where they were before implementing. So when we compare people who are yet to do a consolidation project, let alone dynamic IT, they think the biggest problems are organizational structure and security policy. But in reality, it's not that. It's how you go about buying things, for example. It's how you provision and architect the estate. And these are things that come with experience that people just starting the journey today don't often realize. And if you're making the transition towards dynamic infrastructure, it's the ones in red and the ones in orange that are really the key points to take into account and get advice on and solve, because those will be the bottlenecks going forward to transitioning from consolidation to dynamic IT.
Now, so one of the questions going in here was from Dave here, and he was saying that one of the things that might get in the way of crossing this chasm or climbing these stairs, we're sort of kind of mixing our physical metaphors, aren't we really here? But one of the things that stops this happening is the skills of the people who are in the data center at the moment. Now, virtualization has been seen as a kind of a no-brainer, Lucas, hasn't it? Because you can install stuff that does it. And so you don't need a huge amount of experience or expertise to do that. We're talking about things that these abilities that traditionally come more from the mainframe environment, for example. Is it going to hold us back that we don't have the people to do it?
So I think the skill sets are changing. I think that's an exciting thing for IT, because actually they start to broaden out some of their knowledge about different parts of an IT architecture. I was at a cloud computing session with HP last week, and that was one of the discussions, is actually where are the skill sets going? Yeah. And I think we see people actually being much more, they'll have a foundation of virtualization, they'll have a foundation of networking, they'll understand storage, they'll understand all of the elements that tie together, and mainly because it helps them understand how to deliver a service. So I think those skill sets broaden, but also for a good reason, because people have to be able to move away from something which is a very low-level process and think above that to the service. So I think that's exciting for people to actually see that their skill sets aren't siloed anymore, but they have the ability to add more value by actually being a good breadth player across all of the things that are relevant for dynamic data center.
Yeah, Andy, are we going to be rediscovering some old skills that we've forgotten about?
I think we most certainly will be. We're going to be having to do a whole bunch of IT service management, and what we think about really as systems management. So holistically, the mainframe approach, because we're going to have many different workloads running on consolidated infrastructure that may change in demand from day to day, from hour to hour, and this has to be all automated, reliable, and highly effective.
I mean, if the whole analyst business doesn't work out for Tony, then there's a chance for him, go back into private practice, isn't there?
Oh, there's always an opportunity.
It's good, If anyone wants to, if anyone wants Tony, take him off our hands for a couple of months, that sort of thing. He's difficult to work with, but he's very, very effective. Yeah, you're not watching this, Tony. So now let's have a look. Let's have a look at another scenario here, Lucas. So tell us about this.
I mean, this is really building on Andy's slide. So all of the amber and the red pieces where you see it's about understanding how you actually get a good flexible cost structure. When the business is going to be more demanding on actually sort of delivering a service back into them, I think the IT also has a duty. IT team has a duty to actually understand what is the real cost of that. And I think that's less of a technology change, but also sort of a drive for IT leadership to actually understand at every single level of that service that's being delivered, what are the costs, and build that up so that in some ways people can understand a chargeback model. So if we look back at Andy's slide, you sort of see the understanding of how you architect, how you look at server procurement, all the software components have to be almost broken down to a service level so that people can understand then what is the true cost of the business. And I think for IT that also drives the right business discussion, because then departments are consuming more expensive services because they need backup, because they need higher levels of service, should be paying more. And that can then flow down into actually the right level of attribution of budget so that people can understand really what the services they get and how much they have to pay for it.
Sounds deceptively simple though, Andy, doesn't it? I mean, it's not that easy.
No, it's not. And if we actually look at where a lot of people are today, we've mentioned already just buying things. Buying things is a big problem for many companies. And actually, we found in our research that it's a big determinant of how successful dynamic IT implementations actually are and whether people can move to it. So the companies that have put in place a mechanism to be able to cross-charge or take account of virtualization and how it impacts how you buy, provision, procure, and run and maintain the systems, the guys who've got a handle on it are the ones that are best placed to make that transition.
So if I understand correctly, some of the problem has been in the past that individual departments buy their server and their applications is budgeted to them, sort of thing, and it's and then once we start moving into this more dynamic environment, it's harder for people to work out who pays for what and how it's charged, how much they should even pay.
Yeah, it's what's mine is mine, and that came out of really the topology-based way of buying
Whose
things.
round is it now? I just looked at the slide, actually. Whose round is it now?
It's who's paying for what.
Yeah.
When we bought things as a box, everything ran on the box. It had a border, and you could contain that border. It had ring-fence storage, and maybe a bit of networking was a bit fluid in the middle. But today, it may be a workload running on X machine one day, Y machine another, this amount of storage today, that amount tomorrow. It's no longer a fixed cost anymore. It's very fluid, and companies are actually having trouble adapting to this new environment.
I'm not surprised they're having trouble adapting to it, Lucas. This sounds actually like quite a difficult step to make.
It is a big step. I think there are a number of pieces people need to look at. I think it starts primarily with actually having a clear roadmap of how people move along towards the strategic level and the advanced level. That they have the conversation and that someone in the IT team, the CIO, IT manager, have that leadership to start having the discussion with the business, because you need that exec level sponsorship, not only in IT but also in the business, that they think this is the type of way that we want to consume IT services. And you look at how cloud services are being adopted broadly is because the business actually does quite like the way of consumption. They then need to put that back into how does that translate into an enterprise who has a data center, who actually have an asset they need to own, and how they translate that term of consumption back into new services they're delivering.
And if people want outside help on this, who's going to deliver outside help for them? Have they got to work it out for themselves?
Well, I think there's a whole host of companies that you can turn to.
These are the kind of questions we're getting asked here.
Yeah.
How do we do this?
It would be to turn to the experts, basically. So there's a combination. You've got the system integrator type folks out there who do this day in and day out, who focus really on IT transformation. So if you're a company that's a reasonable size and struggling to adapt, probably a system integrator type approach is the best. They can come in with best practice, advice, do a transformation around IT to pull it from static, even if it's consolidated, to dynamic. If you're perhaps at a different level and you're just wanting to get elements of this put in place, so how do we solve maybe just the charging issue. You can get in place people that are more local, more reseller focused with some services behind them, so something like a VAR, and get them in to really do an assessment and point you in the right direction as to which are the best vendors to use, which is the right technology, and what's the right speed and path.
Because we're suddenly now into building a whole new application, aren't we? This whole sort of charging and allocation application on top of it.
We're into a whole new way of running IT and interacting with the business. We absolutely are.
Yeah. Also upset some existing relationships about how things are bought and put in and that sort of thing. They for a long time, a lot of IT departments have very stable relationships with suppliers, particularly departmental relationships, that sort of thing. It sort of turns that on its head.
It does, absolutely. It should be focused on that architecture, that broad architecture that Andy's referenced, and how do you buy it strategically so that people can actually get the right cost and the allocation back out to the service.
Delivering.
But vendors have to take their part in this as well, don't they? And encourage
absolutely.
It, because it sort of breaks their sales relationships as well.
It changes the model, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we should get that all sorted out in about 48 hours. Then what do we do with the rest of our time? But it's very difficult. Now, tell me about this one. So on management integrations, we're really getting into the whole management piece, aren't we now?
We certainly are.
That's all right. Don't leave. Just leave them out.
So, if we're looking at the difference between our old way of doing things and the new, it's really about trying to break the role that the person plays in provisioning and managing IT.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the reason for that? Well, people, frankly, are a limited resource. You can't split them up and throw them around the network and get them doing all sorts of little jobs and then bring them back together again at the end of the day and have everything all tickety-boo. Where they're one person, they're limited in time, and they're overstretched. So what we need to move to dynamic IT is for management to scale with the number of services that you're attempting to run. So if you deploy twice as many services, be it a server, or be it virtual servers, or be it just workloads, you don't really want twice the number of people to be dealing with that. You want the same number of people to be able to do it through a management interface, through policy, or similar things.
I mean, it sort of stands to reason. But haven't we really already delivered that? Isn't that what virtualization was meant to deliver a large amount of?
Well, that is the vision. And as we've said earlier, we're really up the trees at the moment, and we're starting to maybe crawl and walk. Once we get to running, we'll probably be where automation is. All our surveys pretty much show that for most companies, and that's probably 80% of companies, IT management is a very manual process. They've got very good management processes in place, so change management can be quite good, but it requires people to do it. It's lengthy, time-consuming, and slow.
But the tools, also the virtualization management tools, are a lot younger than the traditional tools that people have been using across their data center, and a lot of people just don't trust these things yet. It's not. This is kind of like a work in progress, isn't it?
It is a long-term transition. What we have found, though, is that the companies that invest in management tend to be the most agile and the most valued by the business in terms of the services delivered to end users, as well as the opinions of senior management within the company. And they are the ones that, bizarrely enough, find it easier to get investment going forwards. But there's not always a link between the view of senior management and how IT management tools can actually effectively help the business. So it's making that case for management tools in the first place that is often one of the most critical elements in a successful dynamic IT infrastructure.
I think it's important also, you mentioned around virtualization as that start point, so it is a key enabler, but also once things are virtualized, if those processes and that complexity is still there, I think people are sort of faced, as you can see, with actually sort of an inability to manage lots and lots of different virtual machines in not dissimilar to a way then it's actually is hard to manage a lot of hardware. So I think that transition is only starting to happen. Virtualization is a start point, but people actually now need to look, as we say, around some of the processes that wrap around this.
There's a doubter, there's Magnus, who's sending in the question. He doubts whether what we're actually saying is particularly relevant. He didn't put his second name. I imagine his Metro Light Rail or something like that is your second name, Magnus. I imagine. Anyway, so the last time, so what he's saying is that what users want is they want email to work well and printers to work. They want these kind of things, and that's why virtualization has focused on getting those sort of real basic things working well. He doesn't really think that we're going to see people are going to perceive much of a benefit from the private cloud infrastructure.
So I think people do see a benefit from it. The ones that are already embracing it, so not only in cost savings, but actually there are a good group of people that actually email is their major day-to-day application, but in many sectors that is just one. And there are a lot of then users who actually are dependent on a particular application which is specific to a business, whether it be logistics, whether it be a finance application. And those are the things that people from an IT perspective have to understand. What is the application criticality, and then trying to apply that back into actually how to embrace that into private cloud. A lot of the pieces around private cloud aren't putting in completely new things. They're almost principles that people are taking from the public cloud, which is service delivery, which is about consuming it very easily, and actually applying that back into an infrastructure that people have already invested heavily in, and they can't write off in a single instance.
Okay, now let's look at your scenario here, Lucas. Your business agility.
So I think we're extending on the stuff that Andy said, really, which is that until people start looking at understanding how they can actually standardise a lot of the processes across services, that really they can't manage more and more volumes of virtual machines and therefore services that a business are asking for. And if you look at a lot of the research that comes out of even hardware research companies, that the number of servers is decreasing that much despite the amount of virtualization. And that's because people still want more services on top of it. So the workload isn't decreasing. It's actually more around IT being able to manage an increasing demand on it. And to be able to do that, they need to look at some of the processes that wrap around that. And when you see, I think, some of the principles around how many more servers and services that people can manage around a private or a public cloud, that they wrap into tens of thousands of servers rather than where we are at the moment, which is hundreds of servers per person, which is a significant change. And all of that is driven by the automation of processes.
I mean, there is a problem here, Andy, where you have to balance making things easy, making things available, making one of the problems with self-service, someone was talking to me about the other day, is people tend to help themselves to service.
That's right. And it's about, as we said before, moving at the right speed for the company. So there's a lot of change. It is a transformation that goes on. So if we go back to that previous point about, for example, email systems. Now, for example, virtualization and dynamic IT could even help those types of situations, because if you're just running a static machine, it's got no chance to change if the email workload doubles. For example, if there's some popular event happening and it slows to a crawl. Whereas if you had in place service management and performance management, realize that the SLA is being breached, fire up additional machines, give it more resources, maybe you can scale. So there are benefits to be had, but it's a different situation for every company. And some will be able to cope very well in the old way of doing things, just by consolidating, and that's right for them. But at some point, when the business demands it, they'll probably be having to look at how to go in a more dynamic way.
Now, tell me about your stairway to heaven. It's more it's not really even a ladder, really, this one, is it? Your stairway to heaven slide for this one?
No, this is the right-hand turn, probably.
Yeah.
And it's really about what's important when you move from managing silos to managing end-to-end services, because dynamic IT is all around that end-to-end service management. Mm-hmm. And in the past, we focused very much in management on increasing the feature count, and that was great. It meant managing the individual box or piece of equipment was pretty good. You could do a lot with it, and it meant you're a bit more efficient. But often it didn't actually mean much more for the service that the business got, because things weren't working well together. Everything worked well in isolation. Where we really need to go is for increased integration and interoperability between all the different management elements and all the different pieces that you put together as part of your network and server architecture, so that you can monitor and manage all of them together as a whole. And that can guarantee and enhance the service that the users and the business gets.
Just give me, for example, I don't really get what the difference is on this.
Well, for example, it's if you've got a storage system from one vendor, mm-hmm. a networking system from another, a server system from another, and an application from a fourth. That's four different elements, all that would have their own management consoles and not be aware of the others to any large degree. And if one of them starts to fail or fall over, it's very difficult to manage because everyone is managing one thing in isolation. Whereas if it's focusing on the service, you could focus on all of them together because the interoperability would be able to enable you to pinpoint where the problem is more easily and effectively, rather than having to do a lot of diagnostics and fault tree analysis, etc., to try and get to where the problem really is.
But that's not a private cloud problem, that's just bad management.
It is a bad management problem, agreed, but the private cloud can't be a private cloud without excellent management. So it becomes, you can't really move this step without solving the management challenges. And
right.
that is...
It's also, I think, building on investments people have already made. If you look around most enterprises, they have CMDBs from one company, they've invested in virtualization technology, different storage platforms. It's actually tying that together is probably the best route to get savings and actually the first step towards automation, rather than actually investing in silos around that particular type of technology. So I think it's a balance of actually saying, accepting where people have made investments, but actually thinking, well, the right move forward is actually around delivering a service, so we need to integrate. We need to actually tie those platforms together.
Is there an argument then, Lucas, in that case, for people, if anyone's looking, thinking now, all these projects that we've got kicking off in January to upgrade this thing and that bit over there, to actually say, let's just put that on hold for a little bit and let's start looking at the underlying infrastructure? Should people be stopping things that they're doing so they can get up to speed on this? Is this what you're saying?
I think there has to be an enterprise architecture that actually allows them, if it's not there in place that allows them to move forward, then they're always going to be chasing some of those projects and finding it hard to actually move forward. But that does require that leadership. And I think it's that buy-in from the business. Is what do they feel is really important? Is it the list of the 5 projects starting in January, or is it actually that we need to think beyond that and actually drop 1 or 2 of the projects to give the time and resource to look at some type of architecture?
I understand what you're saying. It's a tough sell, though, because you then have to go back to people and say, you're not going to get an upgrade to your accounting system because we're going to move to a private cloud. It's a difficult problem to sell to, even to your boss.
But I think the business will buy into it for other reasons also. So if that accounting system is important, and maybe they had to do an upgrade because of out of support or an application falling over for whatever reason, or that it was so critical that they have to now look at maybe some type of business continuity associated to it, all of those pieces plug back into why they should be looking around private cloud. So there are valid reasons to reinforce those projects, but also to help understand when to do them and what are some of the benefits of them.
No. You have a slide here. I can see you're looking at the mouse.
I wouldn't dream.
It's going to pop
dream any moment.
Now, there we go. So again, I look at this. This kind of looks at this service-centric thing. You have to explain this diagram to
absolutely.
me. I'm not very good at it.
So I think we're extending what Andy said. So being service-centric looks at actually trying to tie together the different parts of an application. So if the business is focusing on maybe an e-commerce application, there could be a web tier, there could be an application tier and the database tier. But rather than look at it in those individual silos, you're actually looking at it as a comprehensive service, and what people want to deliver around is an SLA to that service. So then if you look at sort of monitoring of that service, you can see maybe there is a flag on it. Where is the flag associated to it? You can drill down into the different parts of the service and find maybe it was a network component or a database component. So it is that integration of looking at it from a service first and then coming down into the right level to provide troubleshooting. I think also from where people are looking, probably more from the strategic and I suppose the more dynamic data center piece, is actually how do they embrace the public cloud with this? And I think having that bedrock of service-centric first, and some of the pieces that then allow them to look at extending an application into the public cloud, then the service is primary. Actually, how it's delivered isn't important to the business. The IT team are making the most of a public cloud, their own private cloud, to deliver the service that is necessary. How that architecture happens is by the by, and that's...
You're painting a picture of a sort of move to public cloud that's quite a long way beyond the thinking of a lot of people that are using it at the moment, though. It's very much the early public cloud business has come from people who are using it tactically.
Absolutely,
but these things, and you're talking about a completely different way of thinking about it, aren't you?
But I think this is trying to give a view, and I think we've tried to do that throughout the session. There are steps to do that, and if people think of it from the service side first, then actually whether it's going onto a private cloud or a public cloud actually helps them either way, because they're seeing it from what does the business want and what is the service I want to deliver. Then the mechanism, and therefore the infrastructure, whether it be private or public, shouldn't be an issue. It's actually then how much does it cost? Can I do it cheaper and better out of the private cloud, or can I do it cheaper and better out of the public cloud? And which part of that application do I want to sit in which place? So it is very much a hybrid approach, and it's trying to break down those elements into easy steps for people. So these aren't reinforced. People are doing this today. So we have a customer with EasyJet, and all of their application where people book online is delivered out of our public cloud, but they manage it locally, similar to they would as a normal service.
And does this just making this transition is then the longer term goal for this, as it breaks down that difference between private and public cloud, and the public cloud doesn't become something you just buy in?
That is part of the roadmap, yeah. The long journey that we're undertaking.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing is when you work in a private cloud environment, you do move to this service-based approach. You also have a management platform in other areas. And what that means is it actually makes it more easy to assess external providers, because if you don't have a service-based approach, it's very difficult to figure out how your application may perform or what its costs may be. Once you do, you know your costs, you know your SLAs, you can evaluate it and actually hold the external provider to account. That's not to say we're all going to rush off and buy private cloud services or public cloud services tomorrow.
No.
But for some applications, it may make sense to do it a bit sooner rather than later. We've even seen some examples, for example, where a cloud provider has a very secure data center and where you're having problems doing a PCI data security standard project, for example, and it's too costly and lengthy to upgrade your own data center, to move some of those critical workloads outside your business into a much more secure data center, but then that is a value-added service that gives an immediate return that you can see.
There are a couple of comments pointed out, because what you were saying there chimes in with a couple of the comments here saying one of the biggest problems is to manage the people that you're dealing with externally, to make sure that they're focused around delivering the same goals as you are, not just maximising their sales or maximising their own benefit, but fitting with a bigger picture for developing this sort of flexible architecture that you're wanting to do. And that's extremely difficult to do, isn't it, Lucas?
And I think once you have that view around service, then it reflects back on some of the procurement processes we were looking at earlier. So if you've got a view around the service you want to deliver, it makes it a lot easier to actually go out to the market, whether it be the complete outsource market, whether it be the hosting market, and actually pick and choose those types of services that you want to plug into your business application.
You're buying services, you're not buying product or...
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And that SLA could be, so actually we want to go to perhaps a hoster because of a specific type of SLA that they're very good at hosting web applications, for example, but tie that back into the data, and the application could sit in-house. But it is very much looking at it from the service-centric side first.
Okay. Now let's have a look. So we're getting near the end, and we'll leave a little bit of time at the end. There's a couple of questions we haven't dealt with yet. So, we're sort of wrapping up here. These are really things that we've dealt with, but it's really summing it up.
It is. It's a summary of what we've been talking through. Is if people understand the operations about how they manage services first, it puts them in a clearer view of actually then how they actually sort of move towards a private cloud. What are the automation candidates they need to look at? Which are the processes they shouldn't really be doing on a regular day-to-day basis? That's driven by the application that they're delivering to the business. And I think once you've got those two first pieces in place, it makes it a lot easier then decide from an infrastructure side, do I put it in the private cloud and move towards actually resource pools? Do I make the most in certain areas around a public cloud? But you have to then see it first from operations and application first. I think the other side is also that as people then move from existing assets, and that could be an existing service or an existing application that people have, is that they get into a piece where they can actually make a choice of whether they are putting it in their private cloud because it makes sense to virtualize, makes sense to run those processes and automate themselves, or alternatively the business wants something completely new. All they want to care about is the application. So it becomes very much that story then of it's a hybrid cloud that people are moving towards.
Andy, this is there is a question. One guy, let's have a look. I've lost the question because they're all coming in. Which is great. Thank you very much. It just makes it more difficult for me. And someone's saying, what's going to be? They've reached the point where they there we are. It's David down the bottom there. Reached the point where he's 100% virtualized. What's the sort of trigger point to move this on here? What's the thing? Is there 10 words or less to say to people, this is what we can have?
The business is saying, can you move as quickly as we want you to? And you say no.
So what's the business going to be asking for that you wouldn't be able to provide then?
Change. And the ability to adapt to changing environments.
You agree with this, Lucas?
Absolutely that. I think the other piece I'd add is not only from a virtualised, but what's happening in that virtualised environment. How is that application performing? They don't care about it being a virtual machine. They'll actually care about what are the 3 or 4 or more virtual machines that tie together to deliver maybe the business application or the email service. It's that they care about, not the fact that it's fully virtualised.
Now, one of the things that always strikes me about this is we end up doing sort of regcasts about things, and we're very enthusiastic about them, and then sort of like 9 or 10 months later we do regcasts about how the problems that you've encountered doing these things and here's how we solve them and everything. It's it's a disappointing business sometimes, IT. But Andy, you've put together your vision 2015 when we're back here and this is how the world will have changed. There'll be our final regcast. There'll be no more problems to be solved.
Yeah.
So tell me, what's in the vision for 2015, and is this a realistic one, or is this just could happen?
Well, I think the evidence even shows today that we're well on the way to achieving the first. Mm-hmm. So most companies are at least virtualizing to a fairly large degree.
Servers will be virtual, generally speaking.
Unless there's a case that, for some reason, it needs a large amount of high-performance memory or something like an in-memory database system.
Or needs
that will be an exception.
Isolated, these sort of ones.
Exceptions. But even then, workloads that may even require a single workload per server will probably be virtualized, even then, for the management ability that it brings. So we're well on the way to the first point, and I think by 2015 we'll be a lot more extensively virtualized, moving from today maybe 1 or 2 virtual machines per server to 5, 6, 7 or 8. There's a long way to go still. In the future as well, we'll have seamless transitions. We won't really care whether it's raw iron or virtualized. It will be able to move between the two seamlessly. And then the final one, which is the one I actually have the biggest doubt that we'll actually have solved, but we'll be improving.
But it's the thing that we're talking about today. It's the total focus of what we're talking about.
We will be improving, I think, but it will be far from being totally solved. We'll be a lot more automated, a lot more scalable, and a lot more manageable.
5-year plan. How optimistic are you, Lucas?
So I think people are already embracing the management automation already. So I think that the challenge isn't around actually the doing it, the management automation. I think the piece is understanding where's your start point if you haven't done it, and looking at those initial candidates of processes to automate. The other side is that IT demand's not going away. And the business that impacts them actually want more, because business has to move on. So I think there'll be new and increasing management automation challenges, and I think we would have addressed some of the ones that people are facing today. But that's because business is demanding more and more from IT on a daily basis. IT changes.
Now we've got some, Andy, I want to take this one to you because David's been sending in a few messages. I've caught them all and I've been keeping up with them. And but he's in the public sector. And what he's doing is talking about is how these possibilities, first of all, they're kind of difficult to get moving in the public sector, but also then they start to influence a whole lot of change about how the public sector delivers service. But it's quite, that's what in the jargon is a big ask, isn't it? Especially in the public sector to start to move to this sort of infrastructure.
It is, as we said at the beginning, a chasm to cross. Yeah. And it's a bit like ITIL. You can take very small bits of it, the bits that make value, and actually add a lot internally. So it's about not being frightened of all of these aspects. You don't have to go the whole hog, but have a look at whether things like changing the way you procure systems has an effect. Find out from buddies in the industry or even from other industries how they've gone about doing this, and take small steps with the aim long term of moving in this direction. And at some point it may become that the momentum behind it can actually give it new legs and take it over. But this is not right for every single company, at least not today. And it's a journey for many. So focus on the few things that are pain points and can give you tangible benefits.
Mm-hmm. But yes, but you have to ask yourself bigger questions and be prepared to do that, don't you, Lucas?
I think I'd reiterate the points that Andy's made, I think, for the public sector, and also the fact that find peers that you can actually group with. So the challenge with a lot of public sector is some of the impact on the security levels is actually, but if you can find local authorities or regions that are happy to work together, you can actually aggregate some of the data centre assets.
All in the services.
So you're still taking the same idea, you're still taking resource pools, but you're applying it across a different level. And I think then you're avoiding the fact of waiting for government to actually say this is the type of approach. You can do it on a local level.
Okay, Andy, now take us through. You've got a few resources for people here. What are these?
So we've done some research.
You should have shortened your URLs. Look at that.
Yeah, we'll have to use tiny URL next time.
Yeah.
So the first one is around IT systems management and the state of play today in mid-sized companies, and looking really at how many of them have best-of-breed management practices and how scalable it is. And that's a great one to get a starter for 10, basically, on getting a handle on automation and management and where to look. The second one is x86 virtualization trends. That's really looking at data center evolution and where we are today with adopting virtualization and moving towards dynamic infrastructure. And the third one is looking at hosted server computing. So when you're looking at external workloads in the public cloud, what are some of the options available today for the types of workloads?
Okie doke. And in a blizzard of links we have today, I don't know if you have a blizzard of links, but I suppose we do, if you do. Lucas, what about yours?
So the main ones we've got here are reiterating some of the points we've made today, particularly the deployment guides. They've been published recently from our consulting services, basically from engagements we've done with customers around the world around how to move on the journey towards private cloud. So it takes a lot of the consulting services and the steps that they do and puts it in consumable resources that people can actually look at and understand how to move through it. The fast track piece is actually almost more packages that we've worked with OEMs on to actually look at software as well as hardware, compute and storage that people can actually buy in instances to actually look at developing a public cloud now.
Okay, guys, we're more or less out of time, so I'd just like to say, I'd also like to say thank you for the guy that put in the message that works with someone called Jack Daniels as well. Not transport, but I mean an amusing name nevertheless. This one might run and run. We'll see how that goes in subsequent Regcasts. But I'd just like to say thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you very much to Andy Buss, analyst named after a mode of transport. It was very fair, your comment today. Yeah, it was just the ticket. Yeah, he finds it really funny.
My door's always open.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm going to have to request you to stop now. And also Lucas Searle. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.
Carrying on from Microsoft. We hope managed to cover your questions. Remember, there's an on-demand of this coming up later, so because you want to catch these terrific jokes against Comedy Gold. And but give us your feedback, because at the Reg we do more of what you like, less of what you don't like. So tell us what you like. My name's been Timothy Roller Skates, and so from the Register, goodbye.